Welcome to the program. I am your host, Andrew Wilkow. It's 8 p.m. here at Ground Zero. It's Passover and Earth Day. For the Earth Day crowd, stick around. Maybe I'll share my spotted owl hot wing recipe and how I like to cook my manatee steaks. Well, we got an admission from the Democrats as to why Trump is facing all of this lawfare, and it came to us via Representative Pramila Jayapal.
And, you know, I go back to the responsibility of Congress here, because had the Senate actually gone through with the impeachment of Donald Trump, we would not be in this situation.
So all of this is because the Senate did not convict and remove Donald Trump. Let's hope Democrats remember that when this Mayorkas thing is done. My first guest is a town hall columnist and legal analyst, my friend, Phil Holloway. How you doing, sir?
Great to be with you, as always, Andrew, although I'm glad it's you in New York and not me right now, because that seems to be the last place any rational person would want to be.
Sometimes we're stuck, right?
Yeah.
You did a great breakdown of who the jurors are. So before we get to let me just ask you this, and it might be a silly question. Does it matter? Because I'm no lawyer, but if you have a county prosecutor resurrecting a years old past the statute of limitation misdemeanor by trying to fuse it to a federal election law violation that he's not empowered to enforce, doesn't this have to get overturned on appeal?
Yeah, well, the problem with putting your eggs in the appeal basket, Andrew, is that a lot of times the defendant is sitting in jail. Now, listen, I understand that a lot of people think that there's no way that Donald Trump is going to be jailed, but I'm not so sure. This prosecutor and this judge, I think, have a fantasy. They fantasize about being the person or persons who go down in history as jailing Donald Trump. So you don't want to ever rely on an appeal. But in this case, with this jury, unfortunately, that might be your best bet. As you mentioned, this is a New York jury in a place where Donald Trump got maybe 12% of the vote in the last election. If he gets 12% of this jury on his side, maybe he can get a hung jury. And if he gets a hung jury, that would be considered a win in my book. But there's no way, in my opinion, I predict it right now, there's no way 12 people from Manhattan will unanimously agree to acquit Donald Trump because it's Donald Trump's name on the indictment, if for no other reason.
The prosecutor in his opening statement said that this was a clear-cut case of election fraud, that the catch and kill was bought and paid for and buried in Trump's business records to protect him from bad information in the election, not from his family or his business reputation. But the defense argued rightly that federal prosecutors passed on that, and here we are in a court that's not empowered to enforce that law. And also on the misdemeanor bookkeeping charge, the previous Manhattan DA passed on it, and even Alvin Bragg initially passed on it. But then somebody coordinated this effort and said, we've got to put this together and get Trump.
Yeah, didn't they bring a prosecutor directly from the Biden Department of Justice to be the lead trial counsel in this case for Alvin Bragg's office? But look, this is a case where, talk about the pot calling the kettle black in terms of election interference. Today, we saw on one screen, we got Joe Biden out campaigning, and we've got Donald Trump sitting in a courtroom defending himself against these ridiculous charges that you rightly point out were at best a misdemeanor. And I don't even think they were a misdemeanor, because there's no way to prove that Donald Trump himself, personally made these entries. And look, this was part of a larger payment to Michael Cohen anyway, and somebody else does the man's books. You got all these things that could be factual defenses. But the big one is that there's a legal defense here. This indictment does not put him on notice, Andrew, of what exactly he is to defend against, because Alvin Bragg has not named what this so-called other crime is that supposedly bootstraps it up to being a felony that's not barred by the statute of limitations. I can't even begin to tell you all the problems there are with this case. The facts of them, though, if you have a rational, fair-minded jury, a big if you have that kind of jury, you could perhaps get an acquittal. But because it's Donald Trump and you're in New York, the deck is stacked against the man, and this is the kind of case that will go down in history, I'm afraid, as one that we as the legal community just cannot be proud of. This is one of our sadder moments, I'm afraid.
All right, talk to me. I only got about 2.5 minutes. Talk to me about the jury. We saw the dopiness of the jury foreperson in the Fulton County case. Even some of the left wing, like, shut up. Why are you going on television? So who's the worst of the bunch here?
It's really hard to say. We don't know all the details about him. Some details have been published, but you've got a couple of lawyers on there. And I'm always afraid of lawyers on juries because what happens is they tend, unfortunately, maybe I should say, tend to substitute their judgment for the judgment of others. Like they may look at it and say, well, I don't like the way, the defense did their strategy. I don't like their trial strategy. And so I think it should be looked at another way, and they will tend to hijack the deliberations and take over. Now, this case may be the exception to the rule because if you've got two lawyers, they're going to argue and they're going to debate. And if you have debating and arguing and bickering and people not being able to agree with one another in the jury room, then you might be in sort of hung jury territory, and that might be the best he can hope for.
All right. Well, I know some of them come right out of central casting, at least, on paper. For
some limousine liberals on there, I tell you that.
Yeah. Upper West Side, Upper East Side, and all that. Hopefully they understand that what we're talking about here is a resurrected misdemeanor that's past the statute of limitations, and that this fusing of the federal election issue, I don't know. Maybe the lawyers will make the rest of the jury see the light. Maybe they won't.
Well,
I have to leave it there.
Didn't Hillary do the same thing, Andrew? Didn't she, with the Steele dossier, she paid a lawyer, right? And she called it attorney's fees?
Yes. We could do a whole nother segment on that. So let's do that next time.
You have to invite me back because I'd love to talk about that one. The pot's calling the kettle black here in this case.
All right, you're invited back. But I got to play this clip of Stacey Abrams. She says questioning DEI is an attack on democracy.
What we know is that the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, is an attack on democracy. It's an attack on education. It's an attack on how our economy works.
Did we vote to get rid of the meritocracy? We didn't. My argument's next.